Hello Tarnished. In this video I'll be discussing my early thoughts on playing co-op in Elden Ring, how it affects open world, dungeon, and boss gameplay. The footage in the background will be of myself and Pi methodically clearing out a dungeon we're both a bit under-leveled for, the minor Erdtree catacombs just inside Caelid, beyond the Limgrave Caelid border. Being summoned to someone else's world is the easiest and most cost-effective way to do some co-op gameplay. Just leave your summoning sign anywhere, using the Tarnished's furled finger item in the multiplayer menu, and if a player somewhere else who happens to be in that same area interacts with it in their game, it'll pull you, as a phantom, into their world for assistance with an area and boss. You can also use the small golden effigy to send your summoning sign to all nearby summoning pools instead, which are these things. Being summoned is a good way to learn an area, since if you die while summoned, you don't lose any runes, nor does it cost you anything to be summoned. Summoning others for help, meanwhile, carries a cost. You need to consume a furrow-calling finger remedy from your inventory or multiplayer menu, and when you do, you will be able to see and interact with other players' summon signs in the world. You can craft these from Erdtree leaves once you buy Kale's crafting kit, and some merchants will have a few of them on offer at a limited stock. You can also find them laying around the world sometimes, but this is rare. If you want to play with specific people, make sure all the players involved have set the same password in the multiplayer menu. That way you don't accidentally end up seeing and summoning someone else. The first way that co-op changes the experience is, of course, it makes exploration and combat somewhat easier. The way in which it does so is primarily by splitting enemy aggression between the two or more players. In other words, via distributed pressure. When all the pressure of the environment and enemies isn't bearing down solely on a single person, it gives you more time to think, to make decisions, to switch items or position yourself better. Because a lot of how FromSoft games define their challenge is through the way they pressure a player, this ability to split that pressure onto different players is incredibly helpful. This is especially noticeable in boss fights, since single bosses especially can often only attack one player at a time, unless both players stand close to it and are both struck by an AoE. When soloing a boss, a critical decision you have to make is deciding when to attack and defend, identify which moments give you enough time and safety to heal, and other such actions. In co-op, the player who isn't currently being engaged by the boss has a much wider timing window in which to make those decisions, and then bring the attention back onto themselves by attacking, freeing the other player to recover as well. In practice, it doesn't usually work as smoothly as this, and there are still ways to mess up, because Elden Ring doesn't become inherently easier in co-op, its existing difficulty merely becomes more spread out, instead of its entire might being brought to bear on a single person. Playing with others also means you have many more resources at your disposal with which to approach a task though, having access to the combined inventories of everyone present. This is especially true if you're playing with a mage, since their long-range poking can safely check enemies at a distance, or in the case of healers, help the group recover from minor mistakes. You will still fail and die when cooperating with other players, and so will they, so I warn you against being overconfident just because you're teaming up. Keeping this in mind leads to something truly special, however, which hits harder in this game than many others. The pressure enhances companionship. You see, as the world remains harsh and unforgiving no matter how you choose to play, this actually increases how valuable and interesting co-op becomes. In many less taxing games, cooperative play is just a fun diversion to mess with alongside a friend. But in Elden Ring and other FromSoftware games before it, having a co-op ally becomes something so deeply meaningful exactly because of how strongly the world exerts its pressure. It's because you both know you can die at any moment, during any foolish mistake, that your teamwork becomes something so much more tangible, so much more valuable. It becomes easier to take the process of cooperation very seriously and truly cherish it, appreciate what it does for you. In doing so, you appreciate each other. Now, if the game was significantly easier, this feeling wouldn't be so pronounced, but because these lands are deadly, and their judgment can be so sudden, every bit of help you can offer each other matters. It feels like you're a party going on a genuine adventure, perilous, unpredictable. Have you ever anxiously delved into a cave or dungeon as a group of friends in a session of a tabletop game, like Dungeons & Dragons? I present the idea that FromSoftware games are the video games that resemble those emotions the most, the thrill and worry you get in your chest as you creep into the darkness, not knowing what kind of unique stories the environment and enemies that jump out to kill you will provide. Other games may pretend to hide things, they may pretend to ambush you, but then telegraph everything in flashing lights with enemies yelling before they get close, or tip their hand by revealing the big surprise in a dramatic cutscene, so you're never actually taken off guard as a group when they come for you. In those games, you're all kind of just actors, you're playing along, you're going through the motions. In Elden Ring, enemies can and will just drop from the ceiling to kill you because they were the same color as the stone and you didn't notice them. You will trigger explosive traps or step on pressure plates that cook you alive unexpectedly and unceremoniously, and most importantly, hilariously. I still laugh at my deaths in this game more than I've ever laughed at myself dying in any other game, except maybe Bloodborne. What I'm trying to say is that this world has a profound level of honesty toward itself and its players. Very little is faked, and if you overcome something, it's because you noticed it and stopped its vain attempt in its tracks. Since all of these surprises are both genuine and with very subtle telegraphing, that also increases the value of companionship by way of an old adage. 2 heads are better than 1. One player might notice details or traps that another player didn't. Another might end up rushing in to block an attack meant for their ally, so that some pesky dungeon-dwelling monster doesn't cut their life short. These moments become exhilarating memories to talk about and think back on later, and if you can play with someone you can trust to resonate with your exploration and combat style, they'll also engender a lot of camaraderie. As a small aside, the fact that you can't pause the game in either solo or co-op play also adds a certain degree of immersion, because it makes you more connected to your character. Since they wouldn't get to just freeze time in order to sort through their belongings, neither do you. Playing alone, this makes you very aware of your own vulnerability, and you'll thus seek out bushes and shadows to hide in before opening up your bag. But playing with an ally, this becomes something you can do more aggressively if the other player is protecting you while you do. A seemingly small decision like the inability to pause becomes an extra bit of texture, a bit of violet mist in the mysterious grey smoke of this game's existence. Finally, Elden Ring gives players incentives to play cooperatively, especially ping-ponging back and forth between their respective worlds, because a summoned phantom gets runes for all enemy and boss kills, in addition to receiving a rune arc for every boss they defeat in another player's world. Until the player gets access to them as a shop item from the Twin Maiden Husks, the best way to farm and grind for rune arcs will remain killing bosses in other worlds. I won't talk about what they do for you here, but just know that you want these items, and they're no joke. I mentioned earlier that summoned phantoms do not lose their runes if they die, they only get sent back to their own world, so not only is being summoned a great way to farm runes and rune arcs, it's also a great way to learn an area with minimal risks. These are just a few of the ways FROMSOFTWARE encourages cooperation and invites players to help others in the community out, because the rewards for doing so, both material and otherwise, are substantial. If you get the chance, I highly recommend you try playing co-op in Elden Ring, at least once. If you try it out with some close friends or gaming buddies, I can almost guarantee you'll all have a very interesting experience. The scale of the world in Elden Ring means that there are so many play spaces to pick and choose from as far as cooperative play is concerned, which is a huge plus in this game. The ability to preserve the intrigue and tension of the solo experience is one reason many players abstained from co-op in earlier FROMSOFTWARE games. Since they were largely linear with few branching paths, the desire to not ruin that tension and challenge by playing with friends was an understandable one, but this isn't as much of a concern in Elden Ring since the game offers so many more options for which zones, dungeons, bosses, and spaces you want to hold on to for solo play, and which ones you want to enjoy as a group. Thank you for watching my video. I hope that you'll consider playing with other Tarnished, and if you still don't want to, I hope my thoughts were a brief, entertaining respite. Good luck in the lands between, and may the night keep you safe.